Welcome to Gemara Academy. In this class, we will learn the Gemara Masechta Shabbos on Daf Chesam at Aleph and Daf Chesam at Beis. Let's begin. Previously in the Gemara, we learned that something in the Rosh Hashanah, which is 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim wide and between 3 and 10 tefachim high, is a karmelis. The Gemara will now present a teaching about an exception to this rule. Amar Ula said, Amud Tisha, a post that's 9 tefachim high by Rosh Hashanah and Rosh Hashanah, the Rabbim mekatfim olav, and the public adjust items on it. So if somebody's holding something, they might place it on this post, adjust it, and then pick it up again. The din is v'zarak, and one threw an item on it from a distance of 4 amas from Rosh Hashanah, v'nachal gabav, and it landed on it, on this post. Chayiv is chayiv, because this post is considered part of the Rosh Hashanah. So although he said that if it's 4 by 4 tefachim wide and between 3 and 10 tefachim high, it's a karmelis. The truth is, if it's 9 tefachim high and people use it to adjust items in it, then it's considered a Rosh Hashanah. And he continues the teaching and says, my time, what's the reason? Why is this considered a Rosh Hashanah? So he goes through the different levels of height that the post could be. Pachas mishleisha, if it's lower than 3 tefachim, Midras Darsi Le'Rabim, the public walks on it, and therefore it's considered part of the public area. It's considered a Rosh Hashanah. Mishleisha va'atisha, from 3 to 9 tefachim high, Le Midras Darsi Le, they don't walk on it, V'le Kutufim Mikatvi, and they don't either adjust items on it. And therefore, since the public doesn't use it in any way, therefore it's considered removed from the Rosh Hashanah, and it's going to be either a Makim P'tor if it's less than 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim wide, or a karmelis if it is 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim wide. And tisha, if it's 9 tefachim high, vaday mekatfim eloi, they definitely adjust items in it, and therefore, since the public uses it, it's considered part of the area of the public. It's a Rosh Hashanah. Now the Gemara moves on to a side discussion which is related to this. Amrle Abaye le Rav Yosef. Abaye said to Rav Yosef, Guma mai. What about a pit? Do we say the same thing by a pit, that if it's 9 tefachim deep and 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim wide, it's considered part of the Rosh Hashanah? Since, as Rashi says, the public uses it. At times, people would place things in this pit and take care of something, or go somewhere, or do something, and then come back to retrieve it. So the public to use it. What's the din by a pit? Do we also say that it's considered a Rosh Hashanah? So Amar Lei, Rav Yosef said to Abaye, V'chein beguma, the same as by a pit. Just like the post that's 9 tefachim high and 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim wide is a Rosh Hashanah, so to a pit that's 9 tefachim deep and 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim wide is also Rosh Hashanah. Rava Amar, Rava said, beguma loy, not by a pit. A pit's different. And it's explained, my taima. What's the reason? Why is a pit different? Because tashmish usage, when it's not convenient, isn't considered usage. To use a post is convenient. People are comfortable to place something on the post. However, to use a pit is not as convenient. And therefore, Rava says, a pit is different than the post. Now the Gemara is going to move on to present 2 questions on Rava, and Rava will answer both of them. Rav Ada bar Masna Rav Ada bar Masna asked Rava a question from a brisa. It says, Haisa kupase, and it's in a purple arrow pointing upwards and downwards, because it's the brisa that the question is based on. So it's coming from the question. It's going to lead to the actual question itself. It says Haisa kupase munachas b'Rosh Hashanah. If one's box was resting in the Rosh Hashanah, gvaya asara v'rchava dalid, it's 10 tefachim high and 4 tefachim wide. The din is ein metaltalin. A person, one may not carry loy miteicha the Rosh Hashanah, not from it to the Rosh Hashanah, v'lei mi Rosh Hashanah moteicha, and not from the Rosh Hashanah into it. He can carry to the box or from the box, and the reason is because the box is considered a Rosh Hashanah and he's in the Rosh Hashanah. Pachas mikain, if it's less than this, if it's less than 10 tefachim high or less than 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim wide, metaltalin is allowed to carry. And Rashi will explain why a person is allowed to carry from a box that's 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim wide and let's say 8 tefachim high. It should be a karmelis. So Rashi will address that. And the brisa continues, V'chein begum, the same, and so too by a pit. Whatever we said about a box, that's how we're going to read it simply, also applies to a pit. So the Gemara asks, now we lead into the question, my lava seifa, is it not referring to the seifa? And like Rashi explains, also to the seifa. It says whatever it says about a box, and it says v'chein beguma, the same as by a pit. So the simple and straightforward way of understanding it is that whatever we said about the box applies to a pit. Now what we said about the box is that if it's 10 tefachim high and 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim wide, a person can carry from it and to it. So to a pit that's 10 tefachim deep and 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim wide, a person cannot carry from it and to it, since he's in the Rosh Hashanah, and such a pit is a Rosh Hashanah. The brisa then continued and said that if it's less than this, then a person could carry from the box and to the box. So how would we apply that to a pit? If the pit was 8 tefachim deep, for example, and 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim wide, he certainly can carry from the pit into the pit, because he's in the Rosh Hashanah, and such a pit is a carmelis. So how could we find a case whereby a pit, a person is allowed to carry from the pit into the pit? It must be, it's referring to a pit which is 9 tefachim deep and 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim wide. And it says you're allowed to carry from such a pit into such a pit because the Brisa is clearly telling us that such a pit is a Rosh Hashanah, like Rav Yosef said, because the public use it. And tashmish al chak, although it's inconvenient and not comfortable, still shmei tashmish. It is considered a proper form of use. So we have a question on Rava. The Gemara answers, Loi, no, aresha. It's referring to the resha. When it says v'chein beguma, it means to say what we said in the resha about a box, that if it's 10 tefachim high and 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim wide, a person cannot carry from the box to the Rosh Hashanah and from the Rosh Hashanah to the box. The same is true by a pit that's 10 tefachim deep and 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim wide, because it's a Rosh Hashanah. But it's not referring to the second teaching. The Gemara now presents a second question from a Brisa on Rava. Esvei, he asked, Rav Ada Bar Masna asked another question to Rava from a Brisa. It says, Niskaven lishbis b'Rosh Hashanah v'yiniach eruv bebar. If one intended to rest in Rosh Hashanah and placed his eruv in a pit, what's this referring to is the din of eruv tchumen, which is that a person is not allowed to walk outside of a city more than 2,000 amas in any direction if it's just a deserted open area. If a person desires to walk further than that, then what he's able to do is he could establish his resting place, his mokim shivisa, for example, 1,500 amas out of the city, and he does that by putting food in that place, and now he's permitted to carry an additional 2,000 amas, and he can also carry to the city. He could also walk. He's allowed to walk an additional 2,000 amas, and he can also walk to the city, since the city is within 2,000 amas. However, there's a din by eruv tchumen, which is that the person has to be able to eat the food in the place that he acquired his mokim shvisa. So if a person intended to acquire his mokim shvisa in the Rosh Hashanah and he placed his eruv in the bar, now he has to be able to take the food from the bar and eat it where he is in the Rosh Hashanah in order for it to be a valid eruv. The din says that the Brisa is Lamaylim yotfachim eruv eruv. If it's in the pit higher than 10 tefachim, and the Gemara will explain what this means. If it's higher than 10 tefachim in the pit, then his eruv is an eruv. It's a valid eruv. Lamata miyud. If it's lower than 10 tefachim, ein eruv eruv. His eruv is not an eruv. So that's the brisa that we're using, and it points to the question, points down to further discussion. So we brought this brisa, which comes from the question, and will lead into an analysis of the brisa, which will lead into a question. So says the Gemara, hey chidami, how is this? What exactly is this case when it says if it's higher than 10 tefachim or lower than 10 tefachim? If you'll say it's by a pit that has 10 tefachim, and like Rashi's, like we explained, it doesn't mean exactly 10, but it has, let's say, for example, 15 tefachim, ulamayla. And when it says higher, and higher is that he lifted it up and set it down. The daloi, that he lifted it up, he raised it up, and he placed it in the pit somewhere on a ledge, let's say, or in a hole. Ulamata de tatoi va'isvei, and lower is that he lowered it and set it down. So if we're going to explain that higher than 10 tefachim means that it's not, the pit is 15 tefachim deep, so it's in the upper 5 tefachim, and lower than 10 tefachim means that it's within the 10 tefachim. If that's how we're going to explain it, mali la milo, mali la mata. What's it to me if it's higher? What's it to me if it's lower? What's the difference? Where in the pit it's placed? This is a pit that's 15 tefachim deep and 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim wide. It's a Rosh Hashanah. The whole pit is a Rosh Hashanah. And if so, hu b'makim echad ve'eruvi b'makim acherhu. He's in one place and his eruv's in another place. They're in two different Roshayos. And he's not permitted to carry from the pit to where he is. So the eruv shouldn't be valid in either case. So says the Gemara, Elalav bebordeles be'asaru. Is it not by a pit that doesn't have 10 tefachim in it? In other words, it's not talking about the same pit and where in the pit he placed the eruv, but rather there's two pits. If the pit is less than 10 tefachim deep, then it's a valid eruv. And if it's more than 10 tefachim deep, then it's not a valid eruv. So says the Gemara, v'gatoni eruv eruv. It says if the pit is less than 10 tefachim deep, it's a valid eruv. The Gemara now brings into its question on Rava, Alma. So we see tashmish al yedei adchak shmei tashmish. So we see that usage, when it's inconvenient, is considered usage, because it said if it's less than 10 tefachim deep, the eruv is a good eruv. Now, which pit are we referring to? If it's 8 tefachim deep, then it's going to be a carmelis. It must be referring to a pit that's 9 tefachim deep, and it's telling us that the eruv is good. So we see that such a pit is considered a Rosh Hashanah, and therefore he's permitted to carry the eruv from the pit to where he is in the Rosh Hashanah, and that's why his eruv is a good eruv. So Rava would give different answers to this. Zimni, at times, Zimnin Mishanile, at times he answered, Huve Ruve Bekarmelis. He and his Erev were in a Karmelis. The pit is really considered a Karmelis because it's 9 Tvachim deep, or 8 or 7, it's less than 10, and it's 4 Tvachim by 4 Tvachim wide. It's a Karmelis. Now, why is the Erev good? He's not allowed to bring it from a Karmelis to the Rosh Hashanah. The answer is, he's not in a Rosh Hashanah. He's in a Karmelis, and the Erev is in a Karmelis, and therefore it's valid. And that's the explanation for why when it's less than 10 Tvachim, it's a good Erev. Now, Rava needs to complete this answer, because in the Brisa, if we look back at the beginning of the Amud, it says, Niskav and Lishbeis B'Rosh Hashanah. It doesn't say it was in a Karmelis. So explains Rava to complete this answer. So that, just to point out, the answer itself is they're both in a Karmelis, and now we can understand. Now, how can we say it's in a Karmelis? So we need to complete that, and we say, and it's an arrow pointing upwards because it completes the answer and explains the answer. V'amai korele Rosh Hashanah, and why does he call it a Rosh Hashanah? Lifi she'ein Rosh Hashanah, because it's not a Rosh Hashanah. When the Brisa says it's a Rosh Hashanah, it doesn't mean it's a Rosh Hashanah. It means he wasn't in a Rosh Hashanah, and Rashi will explain more about this. So the point is that when the Brisa says Rosh Hashanah, the point is that it's just not a Rosh Hashanah, but it's not actually Rosh Hashanah, rather it's a Karmelis. So that's one answer that Rava would give at times. And at times he answered it that Hu Rosh Hashanah ve'eruv beKarmelis. He was in Rosh Hashanah and his Erev was in a Karmelis, and it's a valid Erev even though it's in a Karmelis. How could we explain that? How is it then a good Erev? He's not able to bring it and eat it. So the Gemara explains v'Rebbe. So this explains the answer. The answer is, it's a Karmelis. It's not a Rosh Hashanah. Now, how could it then be a valid Erev? So that's in the arrow pointing upwards. V'Rebbe, this is and it's Rebbe. It fits according to Rebbe. The Amr that said, "Kol davar shehu mishum shvus legazru olav bein hashmashis." Anything that's because of a shvus, they didn't decree against it bein hashmashis, which means that carrying from a Karmelis to a Rosh Hashanah is only a shvus. It's only asamar d'Rabbanan. The time bein hashmashis, no shvus applies according to Rebbe. And therefore, bein hashmashis, which is between after the sun sets and before the stars come out, it's between the two times that serve for the day and the night. It's a time of a suffix, whether it's Shabbos or not, and therefore, at that time, there's no Isser Mid'Rabbanan that applies. Now, the din of the Erev is that a person has to be able to eat it, not throughout the whole Shabbos. He has to be able to eat it by bein hashmashis. Now, according to Rebbe, if a person's in a Rosh Hashanah and his Erev is in a Karmelis, he's permitted to eat it bein hashmashis, because the carry from a Karmelis to a Rosh Hashanah is only a shvus, and a shvus does not apply by bein hashmashis. So the Brisa will fit according to the opinion of Rebbe that says that kol davar shu mishum shvus legazru olav bein hashmashis. The Gemara now continues after Rava gave these answers to the two questions that were posed to him. Rava continues and says, now he's bringing a proof to his answers. Rava says, and don't say with a push off, I'm pushing you off. I'm not just giving you another way of looking at the previous two brises so that they shouldn't be difficult to me. That I'll say the first brisa, when it says v'chein beguma, is only the ratio. The second brisa, I'll say that he was in a Karmelis, or I'll say it fits with Rebbe. It's not just possible interpretations of the brises so that they shouldn't be difficult for me so that I can keep my opinion. It's not just that I'm pushing you off, says Rava. Rather, I'm saying it specifically. The interpretations I gave for the brisa are not just possible interpretations, they are the interpretations that we must say in the brises. And Rava, so basically what he's saying now is he's proving that his opinion is correct. Because Rava now, we're going to go on and present a proof that Tashmish al-Yidei Adchak is lo yishmei Tashmish. And therefore, a pit that's 9 Tvachim deep and 4 Tvachim by 4 Tvachim wide, since the use of that pit is al-Yidei Adchak, it's inconvenient, it's not comfortable, it's not considered good use, because Rava is going to bring a proof to that. That means it's not considered a Rosh Hashanah. It's not part of the public area, because their usage is not considered a proper usage. So therefore, we cannot explain the brises in the ways that come out that a pit 9 Tvachim deep is a Rosh Hashanah. And therefore, Rava says the way that I explain them to be, that it shouldn't be saying that a pit is 9 Tvachim, a pit that's 9 Tvachim deep is a Rosh Hashanah, is not just a possible explanation, it's the correct explanation. We have to say that. So now what we're going to do is, here we have it's in a proof. He's saying that what I said is not just I'm pushing you off, but I'm saying it specifically. And now we're going to bring the background to the proof. So first he's going to quote from a Mishnah, and then we're going to analyze the Mishnah, which will lead into our punchline, which is the proof. So let's bring down the Mishnah. The Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah. If there was a pool of water and the Rosh Hashanah walks in it, so people walk in this pool of water, one who throws an item 4 amas into it is chayiv, because he threw 4 amas in the Rosh Hashanah. Because this pool of water is considered part of the Rosh Hashanah since people walk in it. The Mishnah continues and says, "V'kamahu rekak mayim," and how much is a pool of water? When do we still consider it a rekak mayim and not something already deeper? Pachas miyut tfachim, less than 10 tfachim. The Mishnah continues and says, "Rekak mayim sherishus harabim ma'alechas bay," and a pool of water that the rishus harabim walks through. Hazerik l'seicha dal amas chayev. One who throws an item into it 4 amas in it is chayev. So the Mishnah just said the same thing twice. The Mishnah said first, we'll say the words again. It says, if there was a pool of water and the public walks in it, somebody who throws into it 4 amas into it is chayev, and then it describes that it's up to a depth of 10. It has to be less than 10. And it says again, a pool of water that the public walks in it, somebody throws into it an object, and he throws it 4 amas is chayev. It repeated itself. So the Gemara now is going to take from here some additional information. The Gemara says, Bishlema rekak trei zimni. It makes sense that it says pool of water twice. Why? Because chad b'yemoisa chamo, v'chad b'yemoisa kshamim. One for the summer season, and one for the rainy season. We need to say that both in the summer season and in the rainy season, a pool of water is considered part of the Rosh Hashanah since the public walks through it. Why do we need both? Utsricha, we need both of them. Because if it teaches us by the summer season that the pool of water is considered part of the public area, part of the Rosh Hashanah, we would say the reason is, I would say that people would commonly cool themselves. It's hot outside. People will walk into the pool of water to cool off. So therefore it's part of the public area. But in the rainy season, I would say not. People don't want to get wet in the rainy season. So, therefore, it cannot just say the summer season. We can't even say the rainy season. And if it teaches us by the moisak shaman by the rainy season, so I would say, agav the mitnif mikri v'nachas. I would say that since people got dirty, mikri, it would happen, the v'nachas, that they would go down. Since people are dirty, they would go into the water. And they're dirty anyway, they want to remove some of the dirt, they're going to go into the water as a result that it's rainy outside already. But in the summer season, I would say not. People are not going to go into the water. So therefore, tzricha, we need both. So the Gemara says you can understand why it speaks about a pool of water twice. One refers to a pool of water in the summer season, and one refers to a pool of water in the rainy season, to teach us that in both seasons, the pool of water is considered part of the Rosh Hashanah. However, elehiluch trei zimni lamali. But why do we need walking twice? It could have said a pool of water that the public walk in. If somebody throws dalet amas into it, he's chayev. A pool of water that somebody throws dalet amas into it is chayev. To talk about 2 pools of water. But why does it need to mention again a pool of water that the public walks in? Why do you have to add on that the public walks in? So says the Gemara, this brings us to a proof. Elalav shmami no. So do we not hear from here that hiluch hiluch, that walking when it's not convenient is considered walking? The Mishnah, by saying walking twice, is telling us walking. It's emphasizing walking. Only walking, though inconvenient, is still considered walking and will classify and qualify the place to be part of the Rosh Hashanah. But tashmish tashmish. But usage when it's not convenient isn't considered usage. What the Mishnah is saying is, by repeating twice hiluch, is to say hiluch, specifically hiluch, although inconvenient, will qualify the area where the hiluch happens as part of the Rosh Hashanah, but only hiluch, not tashmish, because that's the only thing we could be excluding. So this is the proof that Rava brings that his explanation is correct, and therefore the pit, since it's a tashmish type of thing that's alidei adchak, it's loishmei tashmish, and when it's 9 tvachim deep and 4 tvachim by 4 tvachim wide, it is not considered a reshus harabim. Rather, it's going to be separate. It's going to be a karmelis. Says the Gemara, Shema Mina, we hear from here. Now the Gemara moves on to one last teaching, which is related to the original thing about the post that's 9 tefachim high and 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim wide. And Taisus explains how it's connected. The Gemara presents a teaching, which is Amar Rav Yehuda, and it's in a purple arrow pointing upwards, because it comes out of that teaching, it's related to it. Since we have the previous teaching, we bring down this teaching. Amar Rav Yehuda said, Hai Zirza Dekani, this bundle of reeds, Rama v'zakfei, if one throws it down and then stands it up, throws it down and stands it up, so Rama, he throws it down, v'zakfei, and stands it up. Rama, he throws it down, v'zakfei, and stands it up. The din is loy mechayev ad the okerle. He's not going to be chayev till he lifts it up. He's not chayev since he never lifted up the bundle of reeds. Rather, he pushed it down and then he pushed it down and lifted it up, pushed it down, lifted it up. He never lifted up the bundle of reeds and moved it 4 amas. So there we have the piece of Gemara, we started off with a teaching from Ula about a post that's 9 tefachim high and 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim wide. And we said that post is considered part of the Rosh Hashanah since the public used it. We presented an argument about a pit that's 9 tefachim deep. Is it also considered part of the Rosh Hashanah because the public used it? Abaya asked Rav Yosef this question. Rav Yosef said it is. Rava argued and said it's not. We presented 2 questions on Rava, which he responded to. Then Rava moved on to prove that his opinion is the one that's correct. And then we concluded with another teaching from Rav Yehuda about the bundle of reeds that the person has to lift it up and move it 4 amas in order to be chayav.